Hey, what's going on? My name is Andy Monroe. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through some of the biggest lessons that I have learned so far in my career in the coaching and consulting events industry. Over the last 4 years, I've been fortunate enough to organize dozens of in-person and virtual events. We've had thousands of attendees come through these events, and we've also generated millions of dollars in revenue from these events. But aside from the acquisition events, we've also done a bunch of fulfillment events, which are events on the back end, where we've been very focused on delivering value and creating transformation in the attendees and really solving the problems of the clients that we were serving. So it's been really fun to learn the game of acquisition and fulfillment events. That being said, I've made a ton of mistakes. We've learned a lot of hard lessons. And the whole purpose of this video is to talk about the lessons I've learned, the mistakes I've made, and help you find success with your events a lot faster than we did. Also, this video is completely unscripted. I just kind of had this idea today and just hit record on the camera, got the microphone here, got my coffee. So we're just going to kind of freestyle, and I'm going to dig through the archives in my brain of everything that we've done in the events industry over the last 4 years and just start riffing off some of the biggest lessons. So with all that being said, let's jump in. The first lesson I want to talk about is most people underestimate how hard it is to create an event, and this applies to both virtual and in-person events. And it's especially difficult when you don't really have a roadmap to follow and you don't have a trail of breadcrumbs to follow. And that's the position that we were in when we first started hosting events. And that's kind of why I started this movement in this channel, is to talk about events and talk about what we've learned and talk about specifically events for coaching, consulting, and community businesses, because it's a very niche type of event. And there was some event content on YouTube when I started to host events, but there was nothing that applied directly to coaching and consulting businesses. And we just kind of had to pave the way and learn the hard way. But there is so much that goes into creating an event. First of all, there's the actual event planning and experience design that goes into creating events, obviously. So, all the miscellaneous tasks that lead up to an event to actually make the event happen, like coordinating with all the contractors, making the branding, the food and beverage, the audio visual, the run of show, all that stuff has to get done. But then it's actual the strategy of the experience as well. Like, how are you going to create transformation in the lives of your attendees? It's a lot easier said than done. And in my opinion, that takes the most time when it comes to creating an event, is actually making sure the event is effective and transformational for the attendees. And that's just the event itself. That's like the event planning, the experience design, which I've talked about on this channel before. That's just 1/3 of the entire puzzle or the pie that goes into making an event. There's experience design and event planning. That's 1/3. Then there's the event marketing. So understanding how to actually get people to show up to an event and getting high quality attendees to show up to an event. That is a whole other aspect of creating events. And oftentimes people underestimate how hard it is to get people to show up to an event as well. So that's why we talk a lot about event marketing on this channel. And then finally, the other third of it, the last third, is the monetization. How are you going to make money with events? That is also difficult to figure out if you don't have a roadmap and a checklist to follow. And that's why we kind of talk about all three of these pillars on this channel. So 1/3 is event marketing, 1/3 is event planning, experience design, 1/3 is event monetization. That's a very holistic view. Obviously, there's a lot of sub items that go into each one of those categories, but there is a lot that goes into creating an event, especially creating good events. And most people underestimate how hard it is to create an event. The second lesson I've learned is that events are one of the, if not the most powerful tool for acquiring clients and enrolling clients into coaching and consulting businesses that I've ever seen. On top of my experience with events, I was also a partner at a consulting company where we went from $0 to $25 million in 4 years. And we had a few different price points. We had lower ticket, we had mid ticket, we had high ticket. And we found that events were just the best way to sell products. And of course, we had a sales team that was crushing it. And as the company grew, we had more and more inbound traffic coming in to book calls on the sales team's calendars. That being said, as the company was in the beginning phase and then all the way up through, the $25 million mark, we were consistently leveraging events to make noise, to establish ourselves as category kings in the industry, and to enroll clients into our business. And the one-to-many power of events and the transformation that happens, like actually transforming the attendees into the person they need to be in order to buy your product or your service, and the trust that gets built between you and the attendees, and the rapport, and how your attendee actually gets to test drive your brand before they work with you by attending an event. All of these elements together work together and just make events so powerful. And Charlie Munger talks about the Lollapalooza effect, and he kind of refers to this from a perspective of mental models, like a bunch of mental models working together to create this massive momentum of the Lollapalooza effect. But the same thing works in events with all of these levers that are being pulled, like the trust, the rapport, the one-to-many, the scalability, the sustainability. Everything works together and just makes events the number one tool for enrolling clients into a coaching consulting business. And this is going to become more and more relevant as we get more virtual and as there's more noise in the coaching and consulting industry. People are looking for brands and people that they can trust and they can actually interact with, and events provide that. Events give you a chance to sit in front of the people that are thinking about working with you, provide a ton of value for them, solve a lot of problems for them, close some loops in their mind, showcase showcase all of your testimonials, kind of build some trust and rapport with the attendee, and then if it's a good fit for them, you can invite them to work with you further after the event. Where the coaching and consulting industry is headed right now, I can say with complete confidence that events are still going to be the number one tool for acquiring clients. The third lesson that I've learned is that experience does matter. A lot of people, especially in the coaching and consulting space, get really caught up in the marketing of events and the monetization of events, which completely makes sense. You want to have a full event, you want people to come and show up to your event, and you also want to make money with that event. That's a given. It's very important to focus on. That being said, the marketing, maybe that's a little bit of a separate category, but especially the monetization, having an effective and good experience for your attendees will make or break your event conversions. And this has to do with something that we call touch points. So a touch point is anytime somebody interacts with yourself, your brand, or your event. And this is before the event, this is at the event, and this is after the event. And these touch points that people are having with your brand and your event can either be net negative or net positive. And if you are stacking negative touch points against you the entire event cycle, it doesn't matter how enticing your offer is, it doesn't matter how good of a fit the attendee is to buy your offer. If they have had a net negative experience at your event, they're not going to buy your offer. And they're probably not going to show up to your future events or refer other people to go attend your future events. So that will hurt your show up rates for future events. That being said, if you're stacking positive touch points the entire event cycle, even from the moment somebody buys a ticket and is in the ecosystem of a ticket purchaser, if somebody reaches out to them and welcomes them into the movement, and they get onboarded into this community, and there's all these people that are talking and learning from each other, and there's pre-event training, and the communication is very consistent, and they show up to the event and your staff is all smiling and has great energy and they're shaking hands, they get a nice lanyard and they go and all the branding is very clear on where you need to go, and they go and all the speakers are amazing and the sessions are amazing and the breakouts are amazing and the networking is amazing and the overall experience is amazing. All of those positive touch points are going to stack in your favor, and it could be enough to push somebody over the line to work with you and buy your offer. Out of the dozens of events that we have organized and the thousands of attendees that have come through those events, we have seen a very strong correlation between the attendee experience and the conversions at the event. So attendee experience does matter. All right, number 4 is that size does not matter when it comes to events. And I know I'm going to explain myself real quick. I'm referring to attendees. So whoever's got their mind in the gutters, you can go ahead and keep watching. That's pretty funny. But size doesn't matter when it comes to events. You want to focus on having quality attendees in the room over quantity. And we had to learn this lesson the hard way through a series of conferences that we organized. They were called Fun Lunch Live. We had 3 in a row. The first one was the smallest. I think the second one was the biggest, and the third one was a little smaller than the second one. But we really had this idea that we wanted to create this massive event at this conference. And the first year had 1,200 attendees in the room, which is a pretty damn big event. Most people would absolutely love to have 1,000 people in the rooms of their events. And it takes a lot of people to get there. But our first event ever for that company, for the Fun Lunch Live, we did 1,000 attendees, or 1,200 was the exact number, and that's a pretty large event. But the next year we wanted to go bigger. So next year I think we had 1,800 or 1,900 attendees in the room, and then I think for the third year we had 1,700. So we started to scale up, and we made it a little bit more broad. We were trying to get as many people in the room as possible. That was at the expense of quality, and that was also at the expense of conversions. It was pretty close, but our best converting event was actually that smaller event where we had the most high quality attendees in the room, because as we got more and more people in the room, these people began to stray further and further away from our ICP or our ideal avatar, and we were building our offer. Our offer was built for our ICP, so anybody in the room that wasn't our ICP, they weren't really qualified to take us up on the offer and work with us further. It was cool to have a lot of people in the room, but we learned a very valuable lesson about quality over quantity. So if you're just getting started in the events industry, or you're currently hosting events and you're upset because you only have 25, 30, 45, 50 people at your events, just focus on those attendees and make sure they're high quality, make sure they're actually your ICP and your ideal avatar. Serve your faces off for those attendees. Of course, you do want to scale your events up and get more quality attendees in the room, but you don't want to be focusing on quantity. You don't want to just get as many people as possible to attend this event. You want it to be your ICP. You want it to be quality. That will make the event a much better experience for the attendees themselves, because the event will be built for them, and it'll also increase your conversions because the people that are attending the events will be the ones that are built, or your offer will be built for the ones that are attending the events. Kind of tripping over my words there, but you get the point. The 5th lesson I learned, which I definitely learned the hard way, was it's important to have a mentor if you were just getting started in the events game, because of how much goes into creating an event. I kind of hinted at this at the earlier points, but when we first started getting into the events industry, we kind of just figured it out on our own and made a ton of mistakes, learned as we went. Some events failed, some events were amazing. It was a very chaotic and kind of painful experience, but we learned a lot, and we're very confident in ourselves now as event creators due to that experience. That being said, if there was a way to find a mentor, if there was a program, an incubator, if there was something that I could have joined to kind of get a roadmap or a checklist to follow, or even someone on YouTube making videos like this, like, hey, this is what you should avoid, this is what you should focus on, this is what you can expect. That would have been a complete game changer for us. So even if it's not us, like, we do offer those services. We have an events incubator for coaches and consultants that are currently hosting or looking to host events. But yeah, even if it's not us, just make sure you find somebody that you can trust that can show you the way through the events industry, because it'll make your lives so much easier. All right, the sixth lesson that I've learned, and I think this will be the last one. I'm not really sure what time I'm at, but the title of this video is going to be 4 years of event experience in blank, and I don't really know how long this video is going to be, so hopefully it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I know you guys are busy, so don't want to take up too much of your time, but the last lesson I want to talk about is that for coaching, consulting, and community businesses, the true power of events is unlocked when you are leveraging events on the front end of the business and the back end. So leveraging acquisition events to enroll clients into the business, and leveraging fulfillment events on the back end to deliver on those clients that you are enrolling. That's where the true power of events is really harnessed with a coaching, consulting, or community business. And the reason for this is if you isolate those two types of events, if you put acquisition events over here and you put fulfillment events over here, acquisition events are the best tool for enrolling clients into a coaching, consulting, or community business. And on the back end, fulfillment events are the best way to deliver a service and to deliver value to people that have enrolled into a coaching, consulting, and community business. So if you pair them together and you leverage events to enroll people into your business, then you use events to fulfill on those clients, you're going to just have an amazing acquisition vehicle on the front of your business, and you're going to have an amazing vehicle on the back end that fulfills on those clients. And it's going to build you a bunch of testimonials, a bunch of social proof. You're going to start to establish yourself as an authority in your industry. You're going to build a community around your brand. There are so many benefits to events, both on the front end and the back end. And when you make them work together, what we call the event flywheel, where it starts to build this flywheel effect of clients being enrolled in the business, then those clients are being fulfilled on with events, and then that starts to affect how your brand looks on the front end, which increases the amount of people that get enrolled into your business on the back end, and it starts to build this amazing flywheel. And that's really only possible when you have events on the front end and the back end that are working together. So if you are currently a coach, consultant, or community owner and you're trying to think through your event strategy, find a way to have events on the front end and the back end of your business. And even though I definitely preach like in person is much better on the back end, virtual gets the job done on the front end, I still believe that in person is the best for acquisition events on the front end. I know there's kind of a lot of overhead that goes into that, and it's like not always right for certain types of businesses. So if that's a little overwhelming to you, then starting off with virtual on the front end is totally fine. In person on the back end is much better than virtual, but if you need to start with virtual, that's totally fine as well. Just find a way to start gathering people on the front end and the back end and leveraging the one-to-many power on both ends of your business. It's going to work absolute wonders and magic for you. Okay, those are some of the biggest lessons I have learned over the last 4 years in the events industry for coaches, consultants, and community owners. If you yourself are a coach, consultant, or community owner and you're currently hosting events and not seeing the results that you want, or you're looking to start hosting events but just don't know where to start, make sure you click the link down below. And if you could like this video and subscribe to our channel, that would really mean a lot to us. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.